I wasn't supposed to wake up in his bedroom. I wasn't supposed to be wearing his shirt. I wasn't supposed to drink the Mafia boss's whiskey. I definitely wasn't supposed to drink it after he warned everyone in the room that touching his glass was a mistake. And I absolutely wasn't supposed to have no memory of how either of those things happened. But there I was. Sunlight cutting through heavy curtains. A room that smelled like expensive cologne and cedar. Sheets softer than anything I'd ever owned. And a man sitting at the edge of the bed, fully dressed in black, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Luca Moretti, the most dangerous man in Chicago. The man who had destroyed my father. The man I had spent 3 months hating. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, quietly, "Tell me you remember what happened last night." I froze. Because I didn't. The last thing I remembered was the charity gala. The crowd. The noise. A glass of amber whiskey sitting unattended on a marble table. And Luca watching me from across the room with that dark, infuriating gaze like I was a problem he hadn't decided what to do with yet. I had reached for the glass. He had told me not to. I had drunk it anyway. And then, nothing. I sat up slowly. Luca didn't move. Why am I here? His jaw tightened. That's the question I've been asking myself all night. What did you do to me? Nothing. He stood. Walked toward me with the kind of unhurried calm that only men who are never afraid move with. And that's what frightens me. He stopped less than a foot away. His eyes dropped briefly to my mouth, then returned to mine. Because, whatever happened last night, he lowered his voice. You were the one who came to me. I stared at him. No. A faint, humorless smile. You don't remember. And somehow, that terrified me more than anything else. Because Luca Moretti was the last man on earth I would ever willingly choose. Yet somewhere in the fog of last night, it seemed I had. Chapter 1. The Wrong Glass. The first time I met Luca Moretti, he looked at me the way powerful men look at things they haven't decided whether to move around or step on. Not desire. Not curiosity. Assessment. I filed that away. It was a Tuesday night in October, and the Harrington Charity Gala was exactly what you'd expect when you filled a lakeside ballroom with politicians, inherited money, and criminals who had learned to wear cufflinks. I didn't belong among any of them. I was there because my catering company had the contract for the event, and my manager had called in sick, and someone had to count the pass trays and make sure the vol au vent came out of the kitchen in the right sequence. That someone was me. I'd been working events like this for 2 years. I had learned something important about them. When you are a plus-size black woman in a black uniform carrying a clipboard, people treat you like furniture. They talk around you, over you, through you. They assume you are either invisible or harmless. I was neither, but I had learned to let them believe whatever made them comfortable. I noticed Luca the moment he entered the ballroom. You could not notice him. He was tall, dark-haired, a face that might have been beautiful if it weren't so relentlessly guarded. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been built specifically for the architecture of his body, and he moved through the crowd the way a storm system moves through a city, without asking permission. Men older than him straightened when he passed. Men younger than him stepped aside. Women watched him. Security watched everyone, but their eyes kept returning to him. Luca Moretti, 42 years old, head of the Moretti family organization. Legitimate on paper, real estate, private equity, 2 restaurant chains. Illegitimate in practice, labor enforcement, territorial control, a web of financial arrangements that the IRS had tried and failed to untangle for a decade. And the man whose company had bought the last remaining property for my father's business 3 years ago. My father had fought the acquisition. He had gone to lawyers, to arbitration, to anyone who would listen. He lost everything. And 6 months after the last signature was filed, he died of a heart attack in his kitchen. The doctors called it natural causes. I called it a man who had nothing left to fight for. So when Luca turned his head across the ballroom and his gaze landed on me, really landed, like he'd been looking for something and wondered if I might be it, I looked away. He didn't. I knew, the way you know when you're being followed, that he watched me for the next 20 minutes. I didn't give him the satisfaction of checking. Later, When the cocktail hour was winding down and my feet were staging a quiet mutiny against my sensible flats, I found myself near the bar setup at the far end of the room. The kitchen was behind on the canopy schedule. My manager kept texting me. My lower back had been arguing with me since 6. I looked at the bar and saw a crystal glass sitting slightly apart from the others, filled with about 2 fingers of good whiskey. It was unattended. It was gorgeous. I reached for it. Don't. The voice came from directly behind me. Deep. Quiet. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to carry authority. I turned around. Luca was standing there, closer than I expected. His eyes dropped to my hand, still hovering near the glass. That's mine. I looked at the glass, then at him. You weren't drinking it. That doesn't make it yours. You left it unattended on a public bar. I stepped away for 40 seconds. 40 seconds is long enough. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, more like surprise that I was still speaking. You always argue with strangers? Only when they're wrong. A pause. You know who I am. It wasn't a question. I know your name. Then you know touching my things is a mistake. I looked at the glass again. I thought about my father. I thought about the stack of unopened bills on his kitchen table that I'd sorted through the week after he died. I thought about the letter from Moretti Holdings that had arrived 3 weeks before his heart stopped. I picked up the glass. His eyes went perfectly still. Cheers, I said, and drank. The whiskey was excellent. Smooth, with a finish that cost money. Luca stared at me. Not with rage. With something closer to disbelief. You have absolutely no idea what you just did. I drank your whiskey. You drank from my glass. Same thing. It really isn't. I set the glass down. Next time, hold on to your drink. I turned to walk away. That was the plan. Walk away. Return to the kitchen. Count the vol au vent. Instead, the floor shifted. Not literally. I knew that. But a wave of dizziness hit me so suddenly and completely that I grabbed the edge of the bar to keep from going sideways. My vision blurred at the edges. My hands were suddenly cold. Luca caught my arm. Hey. I'm fine. You're not. I just stood up too fast. You didn't stand up. You were already standing. His grip tightened. Not violently. Just firmly enough to tell me he wouldn't let me fall. He looked at the glass. Then at me. His expression had changed entirely. The cool assessment was gone. Something harder and more urgent had replaced it. Who poured that glass? I don't know. Which bartender? I didn't see. Which side of the bar did you approach from? Why does it? Which side? The left. He released my arm and turned. His eyes swept the bar setup. Then his hand moved to his inside jacket pocket, and he said something low, in Italian, and 2 men in dark suits materialized from the edges of the room. Luca, I started. Then the dizziness hit again, harder. He caught me, both hands this time around my arms, and his face was suddenly very close and very serious. What else was in the glass? Just whiskey. Something was added. My chest tightened. What? I don't know yet. He looked at the men who had appeared at his side. Nobody leaves. I tried to say something. The room tilted. And the last thing I heard before the darkness came was Luca's voice, close and sharp and startlingly worried. Get the car. Now. Chapter 2. His Prisoner. I woke to the sound of rain against glass. A massive bed. Sheets that probably cost more than my rent. A bedroom designed by someone who believed in dark wood and deliberate silence. I was wearing a man's white dress shirt. It was not mine. I sat up too quickly, which was a mistake. My head punished me for it. Luca was standing at the window. He turned when he heard me move. He was still dressed. Shirt untucked, sleeves rolled. Like he had been there all night and hadn't bothered to change. Finally, he said. I swung my legs toward the edge of the bed. He didn't stop me. That was somehow more unsettling than if he had. Where am I? My house. I need to leave. No. I stood. My legs held, barely. You can't keep me here. I can. That's called kidnapping. I call it precaution. I call it a felony. He turned from the window to face me fully. In the gray morning light, he looked tired. Not physically. I doubted Luca Moretti had ever looked physically tired a day in his life. But something behind his eyes was worn thin. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." "You can barely stand." Details. His mouth pressed into a flat line. "Someone put something in my glass last night." My blood went cold. "What?" "A sedative. Possibly something stronger. The lab results aren't back yet." "I drank your glass." "Yes." "So I was poisoned." "You got a smaller dose than was intended for me." Whatever was in that glass was probably meant to incapacitate me completely, not a woman half my weight who barely took 2 sips. I sat on the edge of the bed because my legs had just made a very compelling argument. Why am I still here? Because whoever poured that drink saw you drink from my glass. I stared at him. "You think they'll come after me?" "I know they will." "Then I should leave."
"No."
"Staying here makes me a target. Leaving makes you an easy one." I looked around the room. My uniform from the night before was folded neatly on the chair. My bag sat beside the door. "Where's my phone?" "Charging." "I need it." "Later." "I need it now." He crossed his arms. "Who are you going to call?" "My boss." "My sister." "Someone who knows where I am." "No one can know where you are right now. You don't get to decide." "Someone tried to poison me at a charity gala surrounded by 300 people," he said quietly. "They did it using a bartender I vetted personally. They chose a method that wouldn't show on an initial talk screen. This was planned carefully by someone with access and patience." He let that settle. "Until I know who, everyone around you is potentially dangerous, including people you trust." I didn't answer, because I didn't have an answer. Luca walked toward the window again. He looked at the city below. "I've had you investigated." I went very still. "You've been with Meridian Catering for 7 months. Before that, you worked 3 other events companies in a 12-month span. Before that, a hospitality management company downtown."
He didn't look at me.
"You're overqualified for every position you've held. Your education is in business administration with a minor in criminal justice. And your father's name was Marcus Webb." The name hit me like something physical. "Don't." "He lost his company to a Moretti Holdings acquisition 3 years ago." I said don't. Luca finally turned. His expression was difficult to read. Not cold. Not quite. "You were watching me last night." "I was working." "You were watching me." "I noticed." "You notice everything, apparently. It's kept me alive." He paused. "My security team counted approximately 27 minutes of direct observation before you approached the bar." I said nothing. He reached into his jacket pocket and set something on the dresser beside him. A pendant on a thin gold chain. Silver oval. The clasp was slightly bent. "My mother's pendant. That's mine." "It was in your bag." "Which you went through without my permission." "I did." I crossed the room and picked it up. He let me take it without comment. When I looked up, he was studying my face. "Why were you really there?" "I told you. I was working." "You were watching me specifically. You knew who I was before I spoke to you. And when I approached you at the bar, you didn't run. You challenged me." He tilted his head. "Most people don't challenge me. Maybe most people are better at picking their battles. Or maybe you wanted to be noticed." I met his eyes. "I wanted your whiskey. That's all." A pause. Then Luca said quietly, "What if I told you that glass wasn't actually mine?" My stomach dropped. "What?" "I hadn't been near the bar all evening. Someone set that glass there deliberately, in a location where I typically stand during the 3rd quarter of that kind of event." He watched me. "Someone knew my habits well enough to stage it." I stared at him. "You think it was meant to be found?" "I think it was placed for whoever drank it." "Why would someone want to poison a random?" I stopped. "Because we were both thinking the same thing. Not random. Someone who might be watching Luca. Someone who might approach his glass. Someone who was already in that room." "No," I said.
He didn't argue. He simply looked at me.
And the quiet certainty in his eyes was far more frightening than anything he could have said out loud. "Get some rest," he said finally. The lab results will tell us more this afternoon. He moved toward the door. And, Nadia? I looked up. He had used my name. Not my last name. My first name, which meant he knew it, and had known it, and had been choosing his moment to say it. Whatever reason you had for being at that gala, he said, his hand resting on the door frame, I suggest you tell me before someone else does. He left. I stood in the center of his bedroom with my mother's pendant clenched in my fist. And I realized, with cold clarity, that Luca Moretti wasn't just keeping me here because someone had poisoned his drink. He was keeping me here because he already suspected I wasn't what I'd claimed to be. And he wanted to find out the truth before I could run from it. Chapter 3. What Hides Beneath Armor. 3 days passed. Luca's house was enormous in the way that old money makes things enormous. Not flashy, just absolute. Dark floors, high ceilings, rooms that felt designed to make you aware of how much space existed between you and the door. I was not locked in. That was the infuriating part. My room was comfortable. The food was extraordinary. My phone had been returned, though I had quickly discovered that it had no signal in the house, a fact that Luca's head of security, a man named Renzo, who had approximately zero interest in conversation, confirmed was intentional. I had a full house but no exit. And Luca was everywhere. He worked from home during those 3 days, which I had not expected. I'd imagined him as someone who spent his hours in glass towers or back rooms of restaurants, not seated at a kitchen island with reading glasses perched on his nose, going through contracts while his coffee went cold. The reading glasses undid something in me that I refused to examine too closely. You're staring, he said, without looking up. Day 2. Early morning. I'd walked in looking for coffee. I'm not. You've been standing in that doorway for 90 seconds. I'm deciding whether to come in. It's a kitchen. He finally looked up. The decision should be simple. I came in, poured coffee, sat at the opposite end of the island with considerable deliberateness. Luca returned to his reading. I watched him turn a page. How many people work for you? I asked. He looked up again. Why? I'm making conversation. You're investigating. I'm bored. His mouth pressed into something that might, generously, have been half a smile. Enough. Enough people? Enough that the answer doesn't matter. I wrapped both hands around my mug. You grew up in this house.
No.
Where?
Italy.
Until I was 12. Then here, then here. With your father? His expression changed. Not dramatically. Just a slight tightening, like something underneath had shifted. Yes. What was he like? Why? I told you. Bored. Lucas set down the papers. He removed the reading glasses, which improved my ability to think clearly by about 40%. He was the kind of man, he said slowly, who believed that strength was the only thing worth teaching and that anything resembling softness was a flaw to be corrected.
A beat. So.
Difficult. Yes. I looked at him. Is that why you're the way you are? Which way is that? Controlled. Rigid. Like you're afraid that if you stop managing everything for 30 seconds, something terrible will happen. He looked at me for a long moment. Something terrible does happen. Frequently. Maybe some of it would happen less if you let people help you. The last person I let help me, he said quietly, tried to poison my drink. The silence after that was heavy. I thought about my father, about his hands shaking when he'd signed the papers that surrendered the last of his company, about the way he'd looked at me across the kitchen table the night before he died and said, I just wanted to build something. I never understood why that made me a target. Someone hurt your family, Luca said. I looked at him. Yes. And you think I'm responsible? I didn't answer. Say it. Your company bought my father's last property. I know. He fought the acquisition for 14 months. I know that, too. Then you know what happened after. Luca was quiet. My father died, I said. 6 months later. Heart failure. The doctors said it was natural causes, and technically they were right because technically a man who loses everything he spent 30 years building and then has nothing to fight for can just stop. My voice stayed steady.
Barely. So yes.
I think your family is responsible. Luca stood. He walked around the island, not quickly, not threatening, just moving closer. He stopped about 3 feet away. I was 23 when my father acquired Marcus Webb's properties. I went still. I was brought into the organization by degrees, given assignments, given targets. I didn't choose that acquisition. I didn't know the name behind it.
He paused.
That doesn't absolve me. I participated in a system that destroyed your family, and I can't undo it. I stared at him. But, I said, because there was always a but with men like him. No but. He held my gaze. I can't undo it, he said again. And I'm not going to insult you by pretending that makes us equal. My heart was doing something complicated in my chest. Then his phone rang. He stepped back, answered. His expression changed within seconds, shuddered, focused. He listened. Then, how many? A pause. Don't engage. Pull everyone back. He ended the call and looked at me with something I hadn't seen on him before. Not fear, exactly, but something adjacent to it. What happened? I asked. 2 of my men were attacked near the south warehouse. Were they? They'll recover. He moved toward the door. Stay in the house. Luca.
He stopped.
I didn't know why I said his name. It had just come out. He turned, and for a moment, standing in the kitchen doorway with the morning light behind him and his expression cracked open just slightly, he looked like a man who had been carrying something enormous for a very long time and was beginning to understand that it had a weight. I'm sorry about your men, I said.
He looked at me.
Then, so am I. He left. I stood alone in his kitchen, and I hated that I believed him. Chapter 4. The Space Between. That afternoon, I went looking for him. Not because I was concerned. Not because the conversation in the kitchen had tilted something in me that I needed to address before I could think straight again. I told myself I was bored. I found him in a room at the back of the house that had bookshelves on 3 walls and a desk large enough to host a dinner party. He was on the phone, speaking quietly in Italian, and he glanced up when I appeared in the doorway. He held up one finger. I waited. I had the distinct sense that nobody made Luca Moretti wait for anything, and I was perversely pleased to have it work in reverse. He ended the call and set the phone face down on the desk. You came to me voluntarily, he noted. Don't make it strange. I'm not making anything. He gestured toward the chair across from his desk. I sat. He leaned back and looked at me with that unhurried attention he used like a tool. The men who attacked my warehouse, he said. They left something behind. What? He opened a desk drawer and set a small object on the surface between us. A cigarette lighter.
Silver. Engraved.
I looked at the initials. VC. That means something to you, I said, watching his face. Vincent Caruso. He tapped the lighter once. He's been trying to absorb my operations for 2 years. Slowly. Subtly. Buying influence with my lower-tier contacts, positioning his people near my distribution infrastructure. And now attacking your warehouses? That's not his style. Which means someone told him to move faster. He looked at the lighter. Someone assured him I was distracted. I thought about the gala. The poison drink. If it had worked, I'd have been incapacitated. Long enough for a transition. Long enough for Caruso to move into the vacuum. So, it wasn't just an attempt on your life. It was a hostile acquisition. His mouth curved, dry and humorless. Ironic choice of words. I leaned forward. Who has access to your routine? Who would know your habits at events like that one? He looked at me steadily. You're asking the right question. Who would know which side of the bar you typically stand on? Someone close. How close? He didn't answer. I studied him. You already have a suspicion. I have several. You're not going to tell me. Not yet. Because you don't trust me. Because I do trust you, he said simply. Enough to worry about what telling you would put you in the middle of. The words landed differently than I expected. I looked at him. He was watching me the way he'd watched me at the gala, with that measuring intensity, but there was something underneath it now. Something I didn't quite have a name for. You're worried about me, I said. I'm responsible for you being here. That's not the same thing. He didn't respond, but he didn't deny it either. I stood and walked to the bookshelves, More to have somewhere to go than because I was interested in his books. Though his books were interesting.
History.
Economics. Several in Italian. One very battered copy of a book of Neruda poems that looked like it had been read many times, which was the most unexpected thing I'd found in this entire house. Neruda? I held it up. Luca looked at it briefly. My mother's. I set it back carefully. She sounds like she was different from your father. Everyone is different from my father.
A pause.
She died when I was 8. I'm sorry. He was quiet. I turned to look at him. He was watching the lighter on the desk, his thumb moving slowly across the surface of the wood, and I thought, this is a man who learned very early that grief was something you buried under control, and that the burial had been so thorough he'd almost forgotten what he'd put down there. I crossed the room, sat on the edge of the desk, which was bold and I knew it, close enough that he had to look up at me.
He did.
I don't actually believe you're responsible for my father, I said. Something moved in his eyes. Directly, I clarified. I don't think you personally made that decision. I was part of an organization that did. So was every employee who filed a paper. That's not equivalent. No, I agreed. But it's more complicated than I wanted it to be when I hated you from a distance. He looked at me for a long moment. You still hate me? I'm working on it. The faintest thing moved across his face. He reached out. 2 fingers. Rested them against the back of my hand on the desk. Not holding. Not grabbing. Just there. My pulse did something embarrassing. I didn't move my hand. He watched my face. Then his phone rang again. He pulled back. Answered. And the expression that replaced everything else was hard and immediate. Say that again. A pause. Who confirmed it? Another pause. He looked at me. Don't move her. He ended the call. What happened? His voice was very controlled. The woman who was working the bar at the gala. The bartender? She's been found. My breath caught. Is she? She's alive. His eyes were dark. She's talking.
About what?
He stood. About who hired her to put something in that glass. He looked at me.
Nadia.
Who else knew you were going to be at that gala? I went cold. What? The bartender says she was given your description. His voice was measured, controlled. She was told to make sure you found that glass. The room went very quiet. Someone wasn't trying to poison you, I said slowly.
No.
They were trying to dose me. Yes. My hands were trembling.
Why? Luca looked at me.
And there was something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not strategy. Something raw. Something frightened. Because, he said quietly, someone wanted you to come to me. Chapter 5. What I know about you. I didn't sleep that night. By the time Luca returned from wherever he'd gone to deal with the bartender situation, it was past midnight, and I was in the library with every lamp on, staring at nothing. He appeared in the doorway. He saw my face. He came in without saying anything. Sat across from me. Waited. Tell me what she said, I finally asked. She was approached 3 weeks before the gala. Paid cash. Given instructions. She was told where you would be standing and approximately when. Told which glass to prepare. Told that she needed to make sure you were the one who found it. What did she put in it? A compound.
He paused.
Designed to lower inhibitions and heighten emotional responsiveness. Not dangerous at a single dose, but powerful enough to make someone who drank it feel. He stopped. Safe, I finished.
He looked at me.
Yes. I sat with that for a moment. Someone wanted me to feel safe in a room with you. Or vulnerable, depending on the intent. Why? That's what I've been trying to determine. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes level with mine. I need you to tell me something truthfully. Not the version you've been using since you got here. I looked at him. I need to know if there's anyone in your life, family, former employer, anyone, who would benefit from you becoming connected to me. The question was more specific than I expected. Connected how? Romantically. Professionally. Any kind of alliance. I shook my head slowly. I'm nobody, Luca. My father is gone. My mother left when I was 9. I have a sister in Atlanta, who I call twice a month. I work catering events. You were trained. The words fell flat into the space between us. I didn't move. He continued quietly. I had my security team watch the footage from the gala, not just the general cameras. The ones I have installed personally in event spaces I frequent.
He paused.
You spent 40 minutes before our encounter conducting what any trained observer would recognize as a professional security survey of that room. Exits, cameras, personnel positions. Systematic. Practiced. I said nothing. The way you carry yourself when you don't think anyone is watching is completely different from the way you move when you think you're being observed. Still nothing. And when you went dizzy at the bar. His voice softened, barely. Your first instinct wasn't to call for help. It was to assess. I looked at the floor. Nadia. Stop saying my name like that. Like what? Like you already know everything, and you're just waiting for me to confirm it. I don't know everything. That's why I'm asking. I looked at him. He was watching me with that patient intensity. No threat in it. Just waiting. I made a decision. My sister's husband works for the city's financial crimes unit, I said. 3 years ago, he started looking into the Moretti family's property acquisitions. He found inconsistencies. Potential evidence that some of the acquisitions were conducted under coercion, that companies were pressured into selling by people who worked for your organization. Luca was very still. My father's company was one of them. My brother-in-law believed my father was specifically targeted because he had documentation of a separate transaction that could have been used against someone in your operation. I met his eyes. He asked me to help gather information. Silence. You were working for a federal investigation. Informally. Not officially. Just gathering. Watching. At the gala. Yes. Luca stood. He walked to the window. He stood there for a long time. How long? He said finally. 3 months. Moving through event industry positions to get access to spaces you frequent. Did you find anything?
No.
I paused. You're careful. He turned around. I expected anger. I did not expect what was on his face. Something close to grief. Your father's documentation, he said. Do you know what it was about? A property deal in 2017. My brother-in-law thought it involved evidence that someone in your organization extorted a local council member. Not my organization. I frowned. What? Luca's jaw was tight. 2017, the council member. I know the deal you're describing. He looked directly at me. That was conducted by an operation that was using my organization's structure as cover. Without my knowledge. I shut it down in 2018 when I found out. You shut it down. I dismantled the people responsible. I stared at him. Then who? The window behind him exploded. Glass everywhere. I hit the floor before I'd consciously decided to move, pulling a lamp down as I went, extinguishing the light. In the darkness, I heard Luca moving, heard the rapid footsteps of security flooding the hallway, heard shouting in Italian, and the distant sound of a vehicle. Luca, I called. I'm here. His voice.
Steady.
Close. 2 feet away, in the dark, on the floor beside me. His hand found my arm. Are you hurt?
No.
You?
No.
From somewhere outside, an engine. Running hard. Getting farther. Then silence. Then Renzo's voice from the doorway, urgent. They're gone. 1 shooter. Vehicle plate came back to a shell company. Luca pressed something into my hand in the dark. My phone. With a signal. For exactly 30 seconds before it dropped. But long enough to see the message that had arrived from my brother-in-law's number. 2 words. Get out. Chapter 6, The Real Enemy. The next morning, Luca laid everything on the table.
Literally.
He covered the dining room table with photographs, documents, printed satellite images, and a timeline that went back for years, and he stood at the head of it and looked at me with an expression that said he'd made a decision overnight that he wasn't entirely at peace with. If someone orchestrated the drug in the gala and the shooting last night, he began, they want something specific. Me connected to you. Or me distracted by you. I looked at the table. Who benefits from you being distracted? Anyone who wants to make a move while my attention is elsewhere. I pointed to a photograph. A man I didn't recognize. Who is this? Daniel Caruso. Vincent's son. Different from Vincent.
Smarter.
More patient. Luca picked up the photograph. He's been spending money in the right places for 18 months. Positioning people. Building something. But we couldn't determine the target. Until now.
He looked at me.
Until now. I studied the timeline. Something wasn't fitting. I looked at the dates. The first incident, I said. The approach to your bar contact. 3 weeks before the gala. Yes. 3 weeks is when I received the specific assignment from my brother-in-law to attend that gala. Luca's eyes sharpened. Someone knew about the assignment. Who else would know? Anyone who had access to your brother-in-law's communications. I felt cold. He works for a federal unit, which doesn't make it immune to compromise. My chest tightened. You think someone inside the investigation. I think someone wanted you, at that gala, specifically. Used a federal investigation to put you there. Used my glass to bring you to me. He set the photograph down carefully. The question is why you? I stared at the table. And then I saw it. Among the documents. A name. My mother's maiden name. I picked up the paper. It was a financial record. A shell company from 2003. My mother's name was listed as a signatory. I looked at Luca. What is this? His expression told me he'd seen it. That he'd been waiting for me to find it. Your mother. My mother left when I was 9. I haven't spoken to her since. She didn't disappear, Nadia. She relocated.
He paused.
To work for a man named Arthur Delgado. The name meant nothing to me. Who is Arthur Delgado? Luca looked at me, with something careful in his eyes. He's the person my father spent 15 years trying to destroy. And he's also the person who has spent the last 5 years systematically dismantling everything my father built.
He paused.
Using people my father never knew to anticipate. My hands were shaking. You think my mother? I think your mother has been working against my family for 20 years. That's not, she wouldn't. Nadia. He came around the table. He stood close. I'm not saying she's a villain. I'm saying she was positioned. By someone who understood that the most effective way to damage something, he paused, is to get close to the people who built it. I stared at him. She had me. Yes. She had me and then she left and then I stopped. My mind was spinning. And then, 20 years later, someone made sure you were brought into a room with me. He held my gaze. This isn't about Caruso. Caruso is being used, the same as the bartender, the same as the investigation. Then who? A knock at the door. Renzo entered.
She's here, he said.
Luca went still.
Who?
I asked. Renzo looked at me. A woman, he said. She won't give her name. She says she's your mother. The room tilted. Not from a drug this time. From something worse. I looked at Luca. His face was unreadable, but he put his hand on my arm, and whatever he said next was going to change everything. I've met her before, he said quietly. Chapter 7. The Woman Who Stayed. Her name was Vera. Vera Webb, born Vera Russo, which I had never known. She sat across from me in Luca's dining room with her hands folded and her back straight, and her eyes exactly the color I remembered from being small enough to fit under her arm. Dark brown, steady, giving nothing away, and I found I had nothing to say. Luca stood at the far wall. He didn't sit. You left, I finally said. Yes. I was 9. I know. You left and you didn't come back and you sent 3 birthday cards and then nothing for 10 years, and now you're here. Yes. Why? Vera looked at Luca briefly, then back at me. Because what's happening to you is my fault. And I've spent enough years letting other people pay for my choices. I looked at the table.
Tell me. She did.
It took an hour. She talked about Arthur Delgado, who had recruited her when she was 22 and newly married and idealistic and believed that organized crime was something that could be dismantled from within if you were patient enough. She talked about leaving my father, not abandoning us but being pulled out, relocated, told it was temporary and then told it wasn't, and then told that contact would compromise the operation. She talked about watching from a distance as my father's company was acquired. As he fought. As he lost. I tried to stop it, she said. I told Delgado your father wasn't a legitimate target. He wasn't connected to the Moretti family in any meaningful way. He was just adjacent. Wrong place, wrong asset. Delgado ordered it anyway. He was making a statement to the Moretti organization. This is how he works. He doesn't attack the center. He removes things from the edges until the center collapses under its own weight. I looked at Luca. Luca was watching Vera with an expression I couldn't fully read. And me? I said. At the gala. Vera closed her eyes briefly. That was Delgado's design, not mine. He knew about your brother-in-law's investigation.
He used it.
Had someone feed the unit information that would put you at that specific event. To put me near Luca. Yes.
Why?
Because Delgado has been watching Luca for 3 years, trying to find a point of entry. She looked at her hands. Luca doesn't attach to people easily. He's careful, controlled. The usual methods, financial pressure, political pressure, direct threat, haven't moved him. I went very still. But someone who got past his defenses. Someone he chose to protect. Delgado thought I could be used. He thought that if the right woman ended up dependent on Luca's protection, Luca's judgment would be compromised. Silence. I looked at Luca.
He was looking at me.
There was something raw in it. The drug in the glass wasn't to make me fearless, I said slowly. It was to make sure I stayed near you long enough for you to decide to protect me. Yes. He manufactured the whole thing. The initial meeting. The dizziness. The reason you couldn't be released. My chest hurt. I looked at Luca. None of it was real. He pushed off from the wall. Walked toward me. Crouched down so his eyes were level with mine. The bartender was real, he said quietly. The drug was real. The shooter was real. But why I'm here? I decided to protect you before I knew any of this. His voice was very controlled. I could have sent you home with a security detail. I kept you here because...
He stopped.
Because? I said. He looked at me for a long moment. Then, you know why. I did know. That was the problem. We're being played, I said. We are. And if we do what Delgado expects, if protecting me compromises your judgment, then he wins. I took a breath. So, what do we do? Lucas stood. He looked at Vera. You know his operation. Better than anyone. And you came here voluntarily. My daughter is in the middle of something I helped create. Vera met his eyes without flinching. I'm done watching from a distance. Luca turned to me. Do you trust her? I looked at my mother. At the woman who had left. At the woman who had come back. At the 20-year gap between them that I didn't know if I could ever fully cross. I don't know, I said honestly. Vera's expression didn't flicker. That's fair, she said. Luca nodded. Then we start there. He pulled out a chair, sat down at the table with us. Walk me through everything you know about Delgado's operation. Every name, every location, every financial structure. He looked at Vera steadily. And we decide together what we're going to do with it. Outside, the city went about its business. Inside, 3 people who had all been used against each other began, carefully and imperfectly, to figure out how to use that against the man who had moved them all. Chapter 8. Obsession and Fracture. 4 days into planning. That was when Luca and I had our first real fight. Not an argument. Not the verbal sparring we'd been doing since the first morning. An actual, unambiguous fight, conducted at 2 in the morning in the kitchen, with the kind of honesty that only comes out when people are exhausted and afraid and have stopped being careful. It started with a map. I had been working with Vera on Delgado's known safe houses, cross-referencing her information with public records, trying to identify which locations he was most likely using now. I had covered the kitchen table with notes. Color-coded. Organized. Luca came in, looked at the table. Then looked at me. Who authorized this? I looked up. What?
This.
He gestured at the table. You've been working on operational strategy. I've been helping. You've been acting like a partner in a situation you don't fully understand. Something cold moved through me. I understand it fine. Delgado built this operation to use you. You being involved in our counter-strategy gives him more leverage, not less. He already knows I'm here. That leverage exists whether I'm in the kitchen or in a room by myself. Then stay in the room. I stared at him. You're serious? Yes. Luca, this isn't a conversation. I put down my pen. That's interesting, I said, very quietly, because 3 days ago you told me you wanted my perspective, that having someone outside your organization had value. That was before I knew how much Delgado has invested in you being involved. So you're sidelining me because I'm a liability. I'm protecting you because he stopped. I looked at him. He was standing at the edge of the kitchen with his hands at his sides and something in his expression that he was working very hard to keep contained. Because you what? I said. Because I can't think clearly when I'm worried about you. The words came out rougher than I think he intended. I stood. That's not a reason to take away my autonomy.
No.
It's a reason I'm struggling with myself. Struggling how? He crossed the kitchen. Stopped close. His eyes were very dark. You were brought here as a weapon. To be used against me. He held my gaze. And instead, you have become the thing I'm most concerned with protecting. Which means Delgado has already succeeded in compromising my judgment. Just not in the way he planned. My heart was beating too fast. That's not something you can fix by making me sit in a room. I know. Controlling me doesn't make you less compromised. It just makes both of us miserable. I know that, too. Then why? Because, he said, and his voice broke open at the edges, just slightly, just enough. I have never in my adult life been afraid of losing something. I lost things. People left or died or were taken and I absorbed it, and I kept going. He paused. I am afraid of losing you, and I don't know what to do with that. I looked at him, at the man who ran an empire without blinking, standing in his kitchen at 2 a.m, admitting he was frightened. I took a step toward him. He didn't step back. I pressed my hand flat against his chest. His heartbeat, underneath it, faster than I expected. You don't fix it by controlling me, I said. I know. You fix it by trusting me. He put his hand over mine. I'm trying. Try harder. Something complicated moved through his expression. Then he pulled me into him. Not gently. Completely. His arms around me, his face against my hair, holding on with the kind of grip that said nothing about possession and everything about fear of absence. I let him. For a long time. Neither of us said anything. Then, against my hair. I'm in love with you. My eyes closed. I know, I said. I've been trying not to be in love with you for about a week. I felt the breath go out of him. Then his hand tilted my face up. He kissed me. Slow and certain, and nothing like the urgent chaos of everything surrounding us. When we separated, I rested my forehead against his jaw. You're not pulling me out of the planning, I said. A pause. No, he agreed. I'm not. Good. But you tell me every move before you make it. Within reason. Within all reason. We'll negotiate. I felt him almost smile. You are exhausting, he said. You love it. He held me closer. And for approximately 14 minutes, the world was very small and very quiet and contained nothing terrifying at all. Then Renzo appeared in the doorway. His expression killed the moment immediately. Sorry to interrupt. He didn't sound sorry. He sounded rattled, which from Renzo was alarming. We have a problem. Luca straightened. What happened? Vera. I went cold. What about her? Renzo held out a phone. On the screen was a text message. Sent from Vera's number to an unknown contact 40 minutes ago. He trusts her. They're planning a move on Delgado. 3 days. My stomach dropped. I looked at Luca.
He looked at me.
She's been reporting to Delgado, I whispered. His expression was unreadable. Not necessarily, he said quietly. That message could be a plant. He took the phone from Renzo. Or it could be exactly what it looks like. I stared at him. You knew. I suspected. You let her sit at the table and I let her believe she was sitting at the table.
He paused.
The information she received in this house is not the information she thinks she received. I stared at him. You fed her false plans. Yes. Since when? Since the second day. I sat down. My legs needed it. So, you tested her. I needed to know. And now you know. Now I know. He put the phone on the counter. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the effort it was taking. I'm sorry. I looked up. About your mother. The words sat between us. My throat was tight. So, what now? Luca picked up his phone. Called someone. Spoke briefly. Hung up. Now, he said, we let Delgado think he has exactly what he wants. He looked at me. And then we take everything from him. Outside the kitchen window, Chicago was quiet. But somewhere in the city, Arthur Delgado was reading a message from my mother. And he didn't know yet that every word of it was exactly what Luca had wanted him to believe. Chapter 9. The weight of it. The trap was set on a Friday. Delgado believed Luca was moving on one of his financial hubs in the West Loop at midnight. He believed the operation would be compromised by internal confusion. He believed Luca would be vulnerable. He believed all of this because Vera had told him, using information Luca had carefully constructed for exactly that purpose. What Delgado did not know was that Luca had no intention of being in the West Loop at midnight. He intended to be wherever Delgado went when he believed the coast was clear. I was not supposed to be part of the final phase. We had argued about it for the better part of Thursday. You identified his financial structure, Luca said. You've done your part. I know how Delgado thinks. You don't. I'll have Vera's information. Vera's information is filtered through what Delgado let her know. There are gaps. I looked at him. I've been working alongside her for 4 days. I found the gaps. Then brief me on them. Some of it won't transmit in a briefing. You need someone who can read the room. Luca looked at me with that expression I was beginning to know, the one that meant he knew I was right and hated it. If something happens to you, I know. I'm not being dramatic. I know that, too. He looked at the floor. Come back, he said. Whatever happens, come back. You come back, I said. You're the one who makes enemies professionally. He almost smiled. We went together. Delgado's private office was in a building downtown that publicly housed an import consulting firm. Clean. Unremarkable. The kind of cover that survived because nobody looked twice at boring. We were inside before midnight. Luca's team on the perimeter. Renzo on comms. Me inside with Luca. We found Delgado's real office on the 4th floor. He was there, waiting. That was the first sign something was wrong. He was sitting behind his desk with a drink in his hand and an expression of mild, satisfied amusement, and he looked at Luca and then at me and said, I wondered which version of the plan you'd use. Luca's posture didn't change. You expected us. I expected you specifically. Delgado gestured at the chair. Sit down. Both of you. Neither of us moved. He sighed. Vera told me about the false information. She identified the inconsistencies in what you fed her. She's been in my operation for 22 years, Mr. Moretti. She knows when she's being managed. I felt something collapse in my chest. But Luca's hand touched my arm. Just briefly. I looked at him. The corner of his mouth moved, almost imperceptibly. He was not surprised. I replayed it. He had known Vera would identify the false information. He had planned for that, too. I turned back to Delgado. What did she tell you? I said. She told me Luca fed her a false West Loop operation, which means the real operation is here. He smiled. Which is exactly where I wanted him. Why? I said. Because I want to offer him a deal. Luca said nothing. Delgado leaned forward. The Moretti organization has infrastructure I can't replicate. Relationships. History. I don't want to destroy it. I want to absorb it. He paused. Step back. Maintain your lifestyle. Your people keep their positions. I take operational authority. Everybody lives well. No, Luca said. I haven't finished. You're finished, Luca said. The moment you used her family as leverage. He looked at Delgado with an expression I had only seen in pieces until now, the full measure of who he was when he stopped being careful about it. You used her father. Her mother. You manufactured everything to put her in a room with me, and then planned to use whatever developed between us to compromise my judgment. Delgado shrugged. It's effective strategy. It's personal. Everything is personal, eventually. Luca tilted his head. Turn on the lights. Delgado frowned. They are on. The ones outside. A pause. Then Delgado turned toward the windows. The building across the street was illuminated. And through the windows, clearly visible, sat Delgado's 3 senior financial officers, each of them with a Moretti security operative standing quietly behind them, each of them looking at a laptop. Delgado's face changed. What is that? Your financial records, Luca said. All of them. Not the ones on the server I sent you to check while we arranged this meeting. The real ones. From the physical backup your associate keeps at the property on Halstead. He paused. Which Vera told me about. 3 days ago. Before I gave her the false plans. I stared at Luca. He had run 2 operations simultaneously. He had let Delgado believe the false information had been detected and reported while Vera was, simultaneously, unknowingly providing real information about Delgado's backup infrastructure. Delgado stood. You can't. Those records are currently being copied and transmitted to 3 separate locations. 2 federal agencies and a journalist your financial crimes unit has been feeding documents to for 18 months. Luca straightened his jacket. The journalist is the interesting one. She's been building the story for 2 years. She was just waiting for the financial documentation. Delgado looked like a man watching the floor fall away. It's over, Lucas said simply. Not because I outmaneuvered you. Because you underestimated the people you used as instruments.
He looked at me.
She found the gaps in your financial structure in 4 days, without any formal training in forensic accounting. Then he looked back at Delgado. And her mother, who has been in your organization for 22 years, gave me the location of your backup records within 48 hours of sitting at my table.
He paused.
Not because I manipulated her. Because I told her the truth about what you'd done to her daughter's father, and I gave her a choice. I thought about Vera's face. When I told her about my father. The way she'd looked when she understood the full shape of what she participated in. She chose her daughter, Luca said. Delgado sat down slowly, like the weight of it had become physical. The door opened. Renzo entered with 2 men from the federal unit my brother-in-law worked with. They crossed the room. I watched Delgado's face as they introduced themselves. I thought about my father's kitchen table, about a stack of bills he'd never opened, about a letter from Moretti Holdings and the 6 months that followed it. I thought about 9-year-old me watching my mother's car pull away from a house that was too quiet after. None of it was small. None of it would be undone. But it was ending. I felt Lucas stand beside me. His hand found mine. I let him hold it. Outside, Chicago went on being enormous and indifferent. Inside, something finished. And for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe all the way down. Chapter 10. Final Reward. 2 weeks later, I stood in my own apartment for the first time since the gala. It was smaller than I remembered. The kind of small that happens when you've been inside a mansion for an extended period and your sense of scale recalibrates against.